And then I think my voice was also suffering. I think everything started to suffer for me. Maybe this year we can try holding on to our love.
Steve Perry didn't just sing high. He set the bar so high that rivals, radio programmers, and even bandmates spent decades trying to clear it. His voice-powered stadiums rewired the charts and turned quiet studio arguments into career-defining choices.
Happy songs, sad songs on this new record is part of keeping the promise, that's all.
But here's the twist. Most feuds credited to Perry live somewhere between studio reality and fan mythology. Tonight, we untangle both, the myths that made headlines and the facts that actually changed careers. And yes, one name on this list wasn't a rival across town. It was someone standing 3 feet to his left. Number 6. Sammy Hagar. If the 80s had a decibel trophy, Sammy Hagar kept it on his mantle, and that alone made magazines line him up next to Steve Perry, frame by frame, note by note. The comparisons were irresistible. 2 stadium-class voices, both able to peel paint off an arena wall, both feeding radio with choruses you could hear from the parking lot. But here's the twist. Hagar's loudest battles weren't with Perry at all. They were inside Van Halen. The long-running Hagar-Roth tug-of-war became a pop-culture soap opera. And every time it flared, the press revived the eternal barstool argument. Who's the era's ultimate frontman? That spin cycle kept dragging Perry's name into the arena even when he hadn't thrown a single jab. Perry's answer was never a press release. It was method. Where Hagar's appeal leaned on combustible swagger and open-throttle grit, Perry countered with surgical phrasing, pitch discipline, and melodies engineered for repeat plays. That contrast, octane versus precision, turned into a decade-long A/B test across car radios and countdown shows. Programmers would stack "Why Can't This Be Love" next to "Be Good to Yourself," and the public did the rest. The scoreboard wasn't who barked loudest in interviews. It was who lived longest in heavy rotation. And yet, the comparisons did matter. When you're a perfectionist, you hear the competition as clearly as a click track. Perry doubled down on clean power and emotional lift, pushing takes that felt effortless and landed like gut punches. Hagar, for his part, kept proving that tone plus attitude can bulldoze any stage on Earth. So was there a true feud? Not really. More like a high-stakes mirror. Hagar's blaze forced Perry to refine the blade. Perry's polish forced Hagar to bring gasoline. The era needed both. One roared, one resonated. Together, they defined the volume of an entire decade. Number 5. David Lee Roth. Diamond. Dave turned every stage into a high-wire act. Spins, splits, one-liners, the whole neon circus. Press loved casting Steve Perry as his mirror image. Zero acrobatics, maximum emotion. That contrast alone birthed a rivalry the way heat makes thunder. Loud, dramatic, and mostly about the atmosphere. Their paths did cross in ways that keep fan forums buzzing. After Roth exited Van Halen in '85, Eddie called Perry to feel out a jam. One of those butterfly effect moments that could have redrawn the '80s. It never materialized, but the what if still crackles. That tenor over EVH's fretboard fireworks? History would have bent. Then there's the infamous guacamole tale, the late '70s food fight myth that snowballed into Perry in tears. Years later, Perry himself punctured the legend with a chuckle. That's the pattern with this pairing. Stories expand because the archetypes are irresistible. Roth is spectacle. Showmanship so bright it casts shadows. Perry is stillness, the kind of held note that makes an arena go silent. Put them side by side, and people will invent scoreboards even if the players never touch gloves. What mattered in real time wasn't trash talk. It was temperature. MTV demanded motion. Radio demanded melody. Roth embodied motion. Perry embodied melody. Fans turned the contrast into a weekly referendum on what frontmen should be. And yet, the closer you get, the more the feud dissolves into parallel lanes. Perry didn't need flying kicks when a single phrase could stop a clock. Roth didn't need cathedral pure vowels when a grin could ignite 50,000 people. That's why this chapter sits in the list. Not because they traded blows, but because the era demanded you pick a church, spectacle or soul, and their names became the pews. The secret, of course, is that both won. The culture got louder. The songs got bigger. And the voice? It stayed unmistakably Perry. Number 4. Lou Gramm. If you programmed rock radio in the early 80s, you lived inside a Perry Gramm universe. Two tenors with turbine engines, both capable of turning a single vowel into stadium architecture. Foreigner's I Want to Know What Love Is didn't just top charts. It became an emotional checkpoint for an entire decade. Journey's Open Arms had already staked that claim, sitting at number 2 for weeks and rewriting the slow dance rulebook. Put them side by side and you didn't get drama. You got calibration. Engineers, programmers, and fans kept measuring phrasing, grit, and liftoff like it was a weekly sport. What mattered wasn't who threw shade. It was who could hold a room silent for 4 minutes. Gramm brought granite, blues weight, a little smoke, a lot of drive. Perry brought glass, laser lines, high color, and breath control that felt impossible. The overlap made every comparison feel fair, and that fairness made the rivalry useful. When Foreigner soared, Journey answered with arrangements that stacked harmonies like scaffolding. When Journey glowed, Foreigner countered with choruses that punched straight through. You can hear the back and forth in the details. A longer sustain here, a cleaner belt there. Bridges carved to lift a chorus one more floor. Fans love to imagine secret grudges. The real story is simpler and tougher. Two bands pushing each other's ceilings up. Perry didn't need to out-talk Gramm. He needed to outlast him on tape, notes that stay bright after 1,000 plays. Gramm didn't need to mirror Perry's precision. He needed to make polish feel human and heavy. That push created records built like aircraft, light enough to fly, strong enough to circle forever. If there was tension, it was the productive kind. The kind that keeps a singer in the booth for one more take and a producer hunting for the perfect key change. The scoreboard never settled the question. The songs did. And that's why both voices still live on the same playlists today. Number 3. Don Henley. This isn't a headline feud. It's a culture war with two avatars. On one side, the critics' idea of pure craft. The Henley school of chiseled lyrics, studio discipline, and a cool, literate edge. On the other, bands like Journey carrying the arena polish banner. Big hooks, immaculate blends. Choruses designed to rattle cheap car speakers and the upper deck in the same breath. The clash didn't need insults to sting. It lived in reviews, think pieces, and late-night radio monologues where corporate rock became a catch-all label that stuck like gum to anything sleek. Journey felt that sticker more than most, and Steve Perry, whose standards were brutal even by perfectionist standards, wore it like a dare. Henley becomes the face of this split, not because he took direct shots at Perry, but because his reputation stood for a different hierarchy of seriousness. Verses over volume, subtext over spectacle, groove over grand gestures. The debate was never really about talent. It was about what the gatekeepers chose to reward. And for all the snark about gloss, Perry's response was the one thing that ages better than a review. Songs that refuse to die. He doubled down on precision. Phrasing that lands like a lock click. Harmonies stacked with a watchmaker's patience. Ballads engineered to hold their shape under 1,000 replays. Time did the scoring. The corporate tag yellowed on the page, while stadiums, weddings, and playoff broadcasts kept renewing Journey's passport. That's the quiet irony of the philosophy split. Both camps were worshipping craft. They just tuned to different frequencies. Henley's lane proved that restraint can cut deep. Perry's lane proved that perfection can feel human when the melody won't let go. No blood feud, no scandal, just pressure that sharpened a standard. And if the critics were the loudest voice in the room, the next conflict came from somewhere closer, right inside the band. Number 2. Neil Schon. Some rivalries play out in magazines. This one lived at the mixing board. After Journey regrouped for Trial by Fire in 1996, Steve Perry injured his hip on a hike in Hawaii. Doctors recommended replacement. Touring meant months of hard travel and nightly strain, and the calendar was unforgiving. Promoters, insurance, crew, and momentum all waiting on a yes. Weeks became months, then more than a year. At some point, the band, led by Neil Schon, drew a hard line. Have the surgery so the tour can move forward, or we move forward without you. Perry wouldn't rush a major medical decision, and in 1998, he stepped away. Strip the drama back, and you see the old push-pull that made Journey electric. Perry's obsession with melody and control set against Schon's combustible guitar engine and keep-it-moving instincts. That tension, restraint versus flight, built the band's signature balance. The same friction that gave us soaring choruses also made day-to-day choices brutal. One side guarded the voice like a Stradivarius. The other guarded the band like a living organism that couldn't be parked forever. Fans still argue who was right, but both men were protecting something real. Perry prioritized long-term health and the standard he demanded of himself. Schon prioritized a lineup, a crew, and a promise to audiences who'd already circled dates on the calendar. The break hurt, yet it froze the myth in amber. When a voice exits at full power, it stops aging in memory. The catalog doesn't yellow with wear, it gleams. Number 1. Kevin Cronin. Here's the truth. There's no verified tabloid-style feud between Steve Perry and Kevin Cronin. What there is a scoreboard. The kind radio programmers watched like day traders, late-night countdowns, call-in requests, and those carefully sequenced drive-home blocks turned the 80s into a quiet duel where power ballads traded punches week after week. REO's "Can't Fight This Feeling" became shorthand for pure, open-hearted sincerity. Journey's canon, "Open Arms," Faithfully, "Who's Crying Now," had already set a standard every slow dance single had to clear. Programmers would stack both bands in the same hour because listeners simply wouldn't let go. And the public kept phoning in to hear both sides of the coin. For a perfectionist like Perry, that invisible race mattered. You don't need to trash a rival when the meters are spinning. Every extra spin, every quarter hour you hold a listener, is its own receipt. His answer to REO wasn't a jab. It was engineering. Mercilessly tuned harmonies, immaculate phrasing, takes polished until they felt inevitable. Cronin, for his part, doubled down on plain-spoken warmth and melody-first writing, the kind that sneaks into weddings, jukeboxes, and movie scenes decades later. Different routes, same destination. Staying power. If fans imagined icy stairs backstage, the charts told a different story. The audience didn't pick sides. They sang both. Radio didn't crown a single winner. It built a shared runway for anthems that outlived the trend cycle. And that's the tell. In an era accused of being too slick, the most polished songs were often the most personal. The sheen didn't cancel the feeling. It framed it. So while Cronin versus Perry works as a headline, the reality is a quieter kind of rivalry. The kind that pushes two bands to keep refining until a chorus feels bulletproof. In that arms race, everybody won, especially the listener. So did Steve Perry hate these six? Most of the time, the answer is simpler and more interesting. He competed with them on philosophy, on craft, on radio. And sometimes, he collided with them when life and logistics got in the way. The documented fracture with Neil Schon changed Journey forever. The near miss with Van Halen is the greatest what-if in rock. The rest, Roth's spectacle, Hagar's firepower, Gramm's precision, Cronin's chart gravity, and the corporate rock crossfire, formed a pressure cooker that forged one of the most resilient voices in music. If Rivalry is a mirror, Perry's reflections were loud, fast, and everywhere. But the voice? The voice stayed untouchable. Which rivalry do you think pushed him the hardest? And which one is just fan fiction with a catchy hook?